Hello, friends. Are you watching this alone or with someone? Tell me in the comments.
You know that moment when something inside you just flips? Not loudly, not with shouting or tears, but like a silent lock turning deep inside your chest, one you didn't even know was there. That was me, standing in my kitchen at 8:43 on a Tuesday night, staring at my phone screen, watching the credit card transactions roll in like a horror movie. Gucci, Peloton, Delta Airlines, first class. $8,217 in the red, and every charge linked to my name, my card, my account, my life. I didn't scream, I didn't throw my phone across the room or curse at the ceiling like some dramatic character in a TV show. I just stood there numb, letting that icy little click happen somewhere behind my ribs. The quiet kind of rage, the one that doesn't melt away after a good cry or a glass of wine, the kind that builds. Jenna, my baby sister, my mother's angel, the girl who never grew up, the girl who never had to. I knew it was her before I even opened the statement. I could smell the irresponsibility. She was the only other person with access to my account, and she got that access the same way she always did, by whining, by promising to pay it back, by manipulating me with those fake little I love you Ash moments that always came when she needed something. And I, the sucker, always folded. Always said yes, because that's what I was taught to do. Be the bigger person, be the responsible one, be the doormat. So I texted her. Not a long message, just 4 words. Did you use this? 2 minutes later, the phone rang. I picked up. She didn't even wait for a hello. Oh my God, Ash, chill out. I just needed it for a sec. I'm getting paid next week. And seriously, relax, Mom will fix it like always. And then she giggled, that damn giggle, that breathy, smug, spoiled little laugh that crawled into your ears and nested there. I think I felt my molars grind. I remember staring at the wall while she kept talking, some nonsense about how she got a great deal on the Peloton, and how the Tulum trip was basically a wellness retreat, not a vacation, so technically it was a mental health investment. I didn't say a word. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. That was the moment the click happened again. Not the one behind my ribs, the second one, deeper, colder, the one where I realized I wasn't just angry, I was done. And here's the kicker. You know what made me feel sick? It wasn't just the $8,000. I could deal with that. I mean, yeah, it stung. But I've had bigger financial bruises. No, what twisted the knife was the casualness of it all. The way she said, Mom will fix it, like we were still 10 and 13 years old. Like our mother was still swooping in to cover for her, make excuses for her, clean up her messes while I stood in the background with a paper towel and a clenched jaw. Let me ask you something, and I want a real answer in the comments. How many of you have a sibling who got away with murder while you got blamed for breathing too loud? How many times did your mom say, just be the mature one, when what she really meant was just shut up and take it? Because if you know that feeling, then you know exactly what was boiling under my skin that night. I ended the call before she finished her sentence. I didn't argue, I didn't threaten, I didn't even sigh. I just hung up, turned my phone face down on the counter, and stared at the blank wall in front of me. And I smiled. That scared me a little, because it wasn't a happy smile. It was tight, cold, calculated. See, I'd spent 43 years being the one who cleaned up, the one who paid the bills, sent the birthday cards, drove home after every emergency, forgave every lie, and stayed silent every time my mother tilted the scales toward her precious baby girl. I kept the peace. But peace is exhausting when you're the only one working for it. So I made a decision. I didn't freeze the account that night. That would have been expected. She'd have seen that coming. And I didn't call my mom either, because I knew exactly what would happen. She'd cry, blame herself, and then subtly twist it all back to how hard Jenna's life had been lately. I know that script by heart. No, I needed time. I needed space to build something more than a reaction. Because what Jenna didn't realize was that this time, I wasn't looking to stop her. I was looking to make sure she never did it again. And the best part? She wouldn't even know I was coming, not until it was too damn late. It's funny how the moment everything clicks into place, all the years leading up to it begin to replay in your head, like scenes from a movie you forgot you starred in. Moments you once brushed off, defended, or even tried to laugh about, now suddenly feel heavier, more damning, as if your entire life was a slow, deliberate setup for the collapse you didn't know you were heading toward. After I hung up on Jenna and stared at that blank wall in my kitchen, what came flooding back wasn't just about the credit card or the money or the trip she booked without asking me. It was about every moment, big and small, where I'd been taught that my needs came second, my voice didn't matter, and that as long as Jenna was smiling, the family was functioning. I remember being 9 years old, standing in the hallway with a scraped knee and tears welling up in my eyes after Jenna shoved me off the front porch during one of her tantrums. And instead of being comforted, I got told, "She didn't mean it, sweetie. She's just spirited." Spirited. That was the word my mother used like a shield to defend every chaotic, selfish, or downright reckless thing my sister ever did. Spirited when she broke the neighbor's window with a baseball bat she wasn't supposed to touch. Spirited when she skipped school to sneak out with her boyfriend in 10th grade and got caught shoplifting makeup from the CVS near our house. Spirited when she screamed at Dad at 14 for grounding her, and Mom took her out for ice cream because she needed to cool off. Meanwhile, I was the one who never missed a test, always called home if I was going to be late, got a part-time job at 16 to help pay for my own prom dress, and still got lectured for not smiling enough or being too cold. That dynamic didn't fade when we grew up, it evolved. When Jenna dropped out of community college halfway through her second semester because she wasn't connecting with the vibe, she spent the next 6 months lounging in Mom's basement eating cereal out of mixing bowls, while I worked back-to-back 12-hour shifts at the hospital during my clinicals. And when I finally graduated nursing school, after busting my ass for 4 years, Mom said, "That's amazing, Ashley, but have you seen Jenna's new paintings? She might be a real artist." Not a congratulations, not a card, just another redirection of attention to the girl who could turn breathing into a goddamn performance. I wasn't jealous, at least that's what I told myself for years. I was tired of being the afterthought, tired of being told to understand where Jenna's coming from, while no one ever asked where I was coming from, and tired of the quiet expectation that I would always show up when the pieces fell apart. When Jenna overdrew her bank account at 28 and got her car repossessed, I paid the tow fee. When she ghosted her landlord for 2 months and nearly got evicted, I wired the money to buy her time. Each time I was promised, "I'll pay you back," and each time I knew she never would, and that I'd never really asked her to. I didn't need the money back. I just wanted anyone to notice I was bleeding, but no one ever did. So when she laughed on the phone and said, "Mom will fix it like always," it wasn't just the words. It was the validation of every fear I'd buried deep inside. The confirmation that I was still the backup plan, the broom they reached for after the party ended, the person whose needs only mattered in the negative space around Jenna's latest disaster. And the worst part? I'd let it happen, over and over again. Because somewhere along the way, I started to believe that was my role. That love looked like sacrifice. That family meant swallowing your pride so someone else could keep their delusions. But something had shifted now. That quiet lock behind my ribs had turned, and with it came this clarity I hadn't felt in years. I realized that what Jenna had stolen from me wasn't just money, it was time, emotional labor, and the belief that if I just kept being good, being steady, being quiet, eventually someone would notice. But the truth is, they did notice. They just didn't care. Not enough to stop her. Not enough to stand beside me when I finally said no. I wish I could tell you I cried that night. That I finally let it all out. But I didn't, I slept. The best sleep I'd had in months. Because now I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. Not to hurt her, not to ruin her life. But to finally, for once, put mine first. And if that meant letting her face the consequences she'd spent 3 decades avoiding, then so be it. The next morning, I called my bank, not to cancel the card, but to track every detail, every timestamp, every address where the purchases were shipped. I asked for itemized reports. I requested paper trails. I wasn't going to just shut the door. I was going to write the report, send the invoice, and let the world see what I'd been covering up all these years. This wasn't about revenge. This was about setting the record straight. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm, steady, and absolutely unstoppable. There's a kind of silence that isn't quiet at all. It hums, it pulses, it fills the air around you like static before a storm. And as I sat on hold with the fraud department of my credit card company, pen tapping against the edge of my kitchen table, I wasn't nervous or angry anymore. I was calculating, almost eerily calm, the way you get when you finally accept that the war has already started, and the only thing left to do is decide how many bridges you're willing to burn along the way. I gave the woman on the other end of the line every detail: the unauthorized purchases, the delivery address that didn't belong to me, the timestamps that conveniently lined up with Jenna's ridiculous Instagram story about self-care vibes in Tulum. I had the screenshots ready, the dates memorized, and the tone of voice that made it clear I wasn't someone to be placated or talked down to. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and I wasn't here for sympathy. I was here to start a paper trail that ended in accountability, something Jenna had ducked her entire life like it was an airborne disease. After I confirmed the last transaction, the agent asked me, very politely, if I wanted to press charges. There was a pause. Just a breath, really, but in that pause, a version of me from 3 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even last year, would have said no. She would have sighed, shaken her head, muttered something about family, and hoped that this time, Jenna would finally learn her lesson. That version of me would have cried in her car outside work, shoved the hurt into a neat emotional drawer labeled "for later," and kept going. But that version of me was gone. She left the moment Jenna laughed about the theft and leaned on the same worn excuse of, "Mom will fix it." So I said yes. The word felt like armor, heavy, protective, solid. I filed the police report the next morning. I included every single screenshot, every digital receipt, and the signed affidavit from the card company confirming the charges were unauthorized. I kept my tone professional, clear, unemotional, not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I'd learned the hard way that emotion gives people an out, and I wasn't giving Jenna any more exits. Of course, I didn't tell her, I didn't warn her, I didn't even block her number. I left everything exactly as it was because I wanted her to think she'd gotten away with it, just like always. I wanted her to keep dancing on borrowed time, soaking in beach sun, tagging herself in spa selfies, while the trap quietly, slowly, inevitably closed around her. She had no idea the storm was coming. Not until 4 days later, when I got a string of missed calls around 2 a.m., followed by a message that simply said, "What the hell did you do?" I didn't answer right away. I waited until the next morning, until I had my coffee in hand, and the sun was coming in through the window in those soft golden stripes that always made my kitchen feel warmer than it deserved. I pressed call, and when she picked up, her voice was shrill, furious, already on the edge of tears. "They froze my accounts. I can't access anything. My flight back is tomorrow, and they said there's a fraud alert linked to my name. What did you do?" I took a long sip of coffee. Then I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity, and said, "How's Mexico?" There was silence, the kind that stretches so tight it sounds like it might snap. Then she exploded, called me names, accused me of betrayal, screeched that I had no right, that I was making a big deal out of just a few purchases, and that Mom was going to freak out when she found out. That part made me laugh, soft and bitter, because it was so perfectly on brand. Her biggest fear wasn't legal trouble or jail or having to face what she did. No, it was disappointing the woman who had always covered her tracks. And right there, in that spiraling rant, Jenna said the thing that sealed it all for me. "Why are you being such a bitch about this? You know Mom's gonna fix it. She always does." That was the last straw. Not the theft, not the entitlement, not even the threat of dragging my name through the mud. It was the smug certainty in her voice, that hollow confidence born from a lifetime of being rescued, protected, and shielded from consequences. She thought this was still the same game we'd always played, but this time, the rules were mine. I ended the call mid-sentence. Then I sat back and exhaled, slow, deliberate, almost like a release. The next day, I received confirmation from the local police department that a detective had been assigned to the case, and that they were coordinating with Jenna's local jurisdiction for follow-up. It was official now. This wasn't a sibling squabble. It was a criminal case, and she was the suspect. She wasn't laughing anymore. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. But of course, that freedom didn't last long. 3 days later, I heard a knock on my door, and standing there, holding a folder full of printed bank statements and a face full of forced concern, was my mother. And that, I knew, was where the real war would begin. There's a peculiar weight to the way certain people say your name, not with love, not even with anger, but with a kind of practiced disappointment. A rehearsed sigh tucked between syllables, as though they've already decided you failed them, and now they're just waiting to see how far you'll fall. That was the sound my mother made when she said Ashley from my doorstep, holding that manila folder like it contained some kind of sacred evidence of betrayal. Her eyes scanning my face as though she couldn't quite believe I was capable of doing something so, what was the word she used? Cruel. She didn't even wait to be invited inside. She brushed past me, dropped her purse onto the entry table like she owned the place, and began pacing the living room with that tight-lipped frown I knew better than my own reflection. It was the same expression she used the time I got a B+ in algebra, and she said, "I'm just surprised, sweetheart, not mad." Or when I told her I wasn't planning to have kids, and she looked out the window for 10 straight seconds before mumbling, "That's a shame. I think you'd be good at it, eventually." My mother didn't scream, she didn't lash out, and she didn't throw insults like Jenna did. No, she weaponized silence, subtlety, and the unnerving ability to make you feel like the villain just for asserting yourself. "I spoke to Jenna," she said, finally breaking the quiet, as she opened the folder and laid out the printed statements on my coffee table, one by one, like evidence in a courtroom drama. "She's devastated. She's stuck in a foreign country with no money, no credit access, and now a possible arrest on her record." Ashley, what were you thinking? I wanted to laugh. Not because any of it was funny, but because the irony was suffocating. My sister had stolen over $8,000 from me, committed actual fraud, and yet here I was standing trial in my own living room, as if I were the criminal and she the victim of some cruel misunderstanding. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, and met her gaze with the kind of stillness you only develop after years of trying to keep the peace in a family where peace was always contingent on your silence. "I was thinking," I said slowly, carefully, as though explaining basic arithmetic to someone who insisted the numbers were lying, "that it's not my job to keep fixing the messes Jenna makes. I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, she needs to feel what accountability looks like for the first time in her life. And I was thinking that I'm done being the safety net." She flinched, not visibly, not dramatically, just the slightest flicker in her eyes, like a candle's flame in the wind, but she recovered quickly. She always did. "This isn't about the money," she said, as if reading from a well-worn script. "It's about family. You don't put family in jail. You don't humiliate your sister over something that could have been worked out quietly. Ashley, she's your sister." I let that hang in the air for a second before walking over and gently gathering the papers back into the folder she'd so theatrically displayed. Then I placed it back into her hands. She stopped being my sister the minute she laughed in my face and told me you'd clean it up. Again. That was the moment her expression changed, not to anger, but something far worse. Pity. She reached out, touched my arm, and said in that saccharine tone that had driven me insane since childhood, "Oh, Ashley, you've always been so rigid, so serious. Jenna's a free spirit. She doesn't think the way you do. You need to learn how to let things go." There it was, the core of it all. I was the problem because I set boundaries. I was the villain because I demanded consequences. And Jenna, she was just a misunderstood wildflower, tripping through life with the blessing of being perpetually forgiven. That line about me needing to let things go wasn't just tone deaf. It was insulting. It ignored every compromise I'd ever made, every time I swallowed my pride, bit back my anger, and cleaned up a mess I didn't make, simply to avoid exactly this kind of scene. So I smiled, not kindly, not softly. I smiled the way a person does when they know the fight is already over and the other side just hasn't realized it yet. She didn't just make a mistake, Mom. She stole. She committed fraud. And she did it knowing she wouldn't be held accountable because she spent her entire life being rescued. You call that family, I call it manipulation, and I'm done being part of the cover-up. Her mouth opened like she was going to say something, maybe even walk it back. But I raised my hand, not to silence her, but to end the conversation on my terms. For the first time in decades, I wasn't looking for approval or understanding. I wasn't hoping she'd see my side. I didn't need anything from her. She left 5 minutes later, her heels clicking down the walkway like a metronome counting down the end of a song no one wanted to hear anymore. I didn't cry after she left. I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. What I felt was cleaner, sharper, more resolute. I'd lost the illusion of family, but I'd found something better, clarity. But I also knew, deep down, that people like Jenna, and the mothers who enable them, don't go down quietly, and I was right. Because the very next week, I got a letter. Not from Jenna, not from my mother, from a lawyer. And that was when things got interesting. There's a surreal moment that happens when a letter arrives in your mailbox. Not handwritten, not personal, but stark and formal, embossed with the crest of a law firm whose name sounds like it was plucked from a bad legal drama. And for a second, standing in your robe on a quiet Saturday morning, coffee cooling in your hand, your brain tries to convince you that maybe it's not what you think. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe someone misfiled something, and surely your own sister didn't just lawyer up over something so obviously, indisputably her fault. But then your fingers slide under the flap, and the paper unfolds with the rustle of finality, and you read the first few lines, the words potential civil litigation and emotional distress caused by defamatory action. And you laugh. Not bitterly, not angrily, but with the incredulous disbelief of someone who has finally realized that some people really will set themselves on fire just to make you feel the heat. Jenna wasn't suing me. Not yet. No, this was a cease and desist letter, likely pulled from some paralegal's template, meant to scare me into retracting the police report, into removing what she called malicious accusations from the official record. She claimed she had no intent to steal, that it was a familial misunderstanding, that she had every expectation the debt would be paid back. And of course, she made sure to add that the public nature of the fraud report had caused her personal and professional damage, which was rich, considering her last known job was a 3-week stint as a wellness consultant at a juice bar that closed within the month. I read it twice, then a third time, each time slower, allowing the absurdity to settle in like fine dust across the furniture of my memory. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She was angry. Angry that the old rules didn't apply anymore, that I had pulled the rug out from under her lifelong performance and left her flailing center stage with no cue cards. But more than that, she was scared of what it meant that I had stopped playing my part. Because once the scapegoat steps off the altar, the whole dynamic collapses. I didn't respond to the letter. I forwarded it to the detective on the case, along with the copies of text messages Jenna had sent, begging, threatening, and finally swearing she'd make this go viral if I didn't drop it. I also forwarded the audio recording of the call I'd taken 2 weeks earlier, the one where she'd admitted she thought Mom would clean it up like always, and that Ashley's too uptight to fight back. In most states, you only need one party consent to record a phone call. Lucky for me, my state was one of them. The officer responded within 24 hours. They were moving forward. The report was solid. The case was prosecutable. A week later, Jenna was served. There's no satisfaction in watching someone you grew up with walk into a courtroom and plead not guilty to a charge that everyone in the room knows she committed. No high, no thrill, Just a quiet, steady release of pressure that had been building for decades, like finally setting down a weight you didn't even realize had reshaped your spine. She didn't look at me once, not during the arraignment, not during the hearing, not when the judge agreed to offer a reduced charge, misdemeanor theft, in exchange for restitution and a formal apology, neither of which I truly expected to materialize. But I took the deal, not because I wanted the apology. I didn't need a lie in a nice envelope. I took it because it was enough. Enough to be on record. Enough to be done. She didn't call me again. Neither did my mother. There was no final confrontation, no storm of messages or surprise visits or last-minute pleas. Just silence, which, after a lifetime of noise, felt like luxury. I changed my number. I moved cities. I took a promotion that I'd turned down twice before because I'd been too afraid of the extra travel, of being too far in case someone needed me again. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free, or at least I thought I was, because nearly a year later, I was sitting in the HR office of the private clinic where I now worked. Higher pay, better hours, a team that didn't take me for granted, when a familiar name caught my eye on a stack of new job applications. Jenna. Different last name, new address, but unmistakable. Her resume was padded with buzzwords and vague job titles, and her references were suspiciously sparse. But there she was, applying for an admin assistant role in a place where she had no idea I now held final say on hiring decisions. I didn't reject the application right away. I didn't shred it. I didn't laugh or curse or call someone to gossip about it. I just stared at it for a while, my fingers grazing the edge of the paper, thinking about cycles and patterns and how some people never stop returning to the scene of their last successful manipulation. I knew I had the power to end it right there. One click. Done. But I didn't. I set it aside. Not out of pity, not out of forgiveness, but because something inside me had changed. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something better. Control. Peace. Distance. And the knowledge that I didn't need to win a final round. I had already walked away with everything that mattered. She didn't get the job. She never knew I saw her name. And I never looked back. But every once in a while, I wonder if she tells the story differently. If she paints herself as the victim, the wounded sister, betrayed by the cold heart of the rigid sibling who finally snapped. Maybe she does. Maybe people believe her. Maybe they don't. I've stopped caring. Because I didn't ruin Jenna's life. I just finally stopped saving her from it.